This is top 7 notorious small towns in California. Locals warn you not to visit California, the Golden State, land of sunshine, Hollywood dreams, and some of the most breathtaking coastline on the planet. People from all over the world dream of coming here. And honestly, a lot of it lives up to the hype. But here is the thing, nobody puts in the travel brochures. Tucked between those famous vineyards and those gorgeous mountain ranges and those postcard-perfect beaches, there are places that tell a completely different story. Small towns where the economy collapsed and never came back. Towns where something went wrong decades ago and the effects are still being felt today. Towns where locals will look you dead in the eye and tell you to turn your car around and go back the way you came. These are not your quirky hidden gems. These are not your underrated small town treasures that just need a little love. These are the places that even Californians avoid. The towns that show up on lists nobody wants to be on. The towns with stories that are complicated, sad, and in some cases, genuinely dangerous. So today we are counting down the top 7 notorious small towns in California that locals warn you not to visit. We are going to talk about what happened in each of these places, why they ended up where they are, and what it actually looks like if you were to drive through today. Let us get into it. Number 7, Bombay Beach. We are starting at the edge of the Salton Sea, which is itself one of the most bizarre and haunting places in all of California. And sitting right on the shore of that shrinking, increasingly toxic body of water is Bombay Beach. Bombay Beach was never exactly thriving, but there was a time when the Salton Sea was actually a tourist destination. Hard to believe, right? Back in the 1950s and 1960s, the Salton Sea was being marketed as the California Riviera. People were building resorts and beach clubs, and it genuinely seemed like the desert was about to become a vacation hotspot. Then the sea started dying. Agricultural runoff caused algae blooms. The water became hypersaline. Fish started dying by the millions. The smell, which locals describe as a mix of sulfur and rotting fish, became something that you just had to live with if you wanted to stay. And most people did not want to stay. The population of Bombay Beach today is somewhere around 300 people, though some counts put it even lower than that. The town is littered with abandoned buildings, rusting trailers, and the bleached bones of dead fish that wash up on the shore. The waterline has receded so much that old docks now sit hundreds of feet from the water, just standing there in the cracked desert mud. There is actually an art scene here now, which is one of the stranger developments of the past decade. Artists have moved in and started doing installations in the ruins. Every year there is a bizarre arts festival that draws a small crowd of people who are into that kind of apocalyptic aesthetic. But make no mistake, the Salton Sea is an environmental disaster. The dust that blows off the dry lakebed contains pesticides and heavy metals and has been linked to elevated rates of asthma in the surrounding communities. The state has spent years arguing about remediation plans that mostly never happen. Locals do not warn you away from Bombay Beach because it is dangerous in the traditional sense. They warn you because the place has a way of getting under your skin. There is something deeply unsettling about watching an entire ecosystem collapse in real time, and Bombay Beach puts that collapse right in front of your face. Number 6, Islton sits in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta, surrounded by water and farmland, and it looks like a town that time simply forgot about. There was a moment when Islton was genuinely significant. In the early 20th century, it was a major hub for the asparagus canning industry. It had a thriving Chinatown, which was one of the largest in rural California. The canneries employed thousands of workers and the town was busy and economically alive. Then the industry moved on. The canneries closed. The population shrank. Fires tore through parts of the historic downtown and rebuilding just never really happened. Today, Islton has a population of around 800 people and a main street that looks like a movie set for a ghost town that has not quite become a ghost town yet. There are a handful of bars and restaurants that cater to boaters passing through the delta, and there is a famous Crawdad festival that draws crowds once a year. But outside of that one weekend, the town is quiet in a way that feels less like peacefulness and more like resignation. The infrastructure is aging. Flooding is a constant threat in the Delta region. The historic Chinatown district is fragile and in need of preservation money that is difficult to come by. People who live there will tell you they love it for its pace and its community, but they will also tell you there's not much opportunity there, and that young people tend to leave and not come back. That story, by the way, is going to be a recurring theme in this video. Number 5, Bodie. Okay, so technically Bodie is a state historic park now, not a functioning town. But it earns its spot on this list because of both its history and because of the very specific warnings that come with visiting it. Bodie sits in the high desert east of the Sierra Nevada at an elevation of about 8,400 feet. It was a gold mining boom town in the late 1870s, and at its peak, it had a population of somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 people. It was also, by most historical accounts, an absolutely lawless and violent place. Shootings were common. The phrase "bad man from Bodie" was actually a saying that people used at the time to describe someone truly dangerous. There were multiple killings per week. During the peak boom years, the combination of mining, wealth, isolation, alcohol, and a population of mostly young men with nothing to lose created a culture of violence that was remarkable, even by Wild West standards. The gold ran out. The population collapsed almost overnight. By the 1940s, Bodie was completely abandoned. Today, it exists in what park officials call a state of arrested decay, meaning they preserve it, but they do not restore it. It looks like everyone just walked away one day and never came back, because essentially, that is what happened. The warnings around Bodie are specific and genuinely enforced. You cannot take anything from the site. Not a nail, not a piece of glass, not a rock. The curse of Bodie is a surprisingly well-documented phenomenon, where visitors who pocket souvenirs report strings of terrible luck until they mail the items back, which people actually do, regularly. The park has a file of letters from people explaining why they are returning what they took. Is the curse real? That is not really the point. The point is that Bodie sits in an extremely remote location. The roads leading to it are rough, and in winter it is essentially inaccessible. People do get stranded out there. The isolation is not a joke. Number 4. Clear Lake. Now we are getting into territory that is genuinely difficult to talk about, because the problems here are not about history or environmental decay. They are about what poverty and neglect look like in a real, living community right now. Clear Lake sits on the shore of Clear Lake, which is actually the largest natural freshwater lake entirely within California. On paper, that sounds like it should be an asset. In practice, Clear Lake is consistently ranked as one of the most impoverished cities in the state. The unemployment rate here runs significantly above the state average. Methamphetamine has devastated the community for decades. Violent crime rates are high. The local school system struggles with funding and resources. Property values are among the lowest in California, which has attracted people looking for cheap housing but without the broader economic activity needed to support a real community. The lake itself has significant water quality problems. Harmful algal blooms occur frequently and have led to repeated warnings and closures over the years. The same agricultural and development pressures that hurt water quality elsewhere in California have hit Clear Lake hard, and cleanup efforts move slowly. What makes Clear Lake especially complicated is that there is a real community there. People who care about the place and are trying hard to turn things around. There are local organizations doing genuine work. The natural setting really is beautiful in ways that the economic statistics cannot capture. But locals who have moved away will warn you that the combination of high crime, limited services, and the psychological weight of a community that has been struggling for so long creates an environment that is very hard to build a stable life in. They are not saying this to be cruel. They are saying it because they lived it. Number 3. Vallejo. Vallejo is different from the other towns on this list because it is not small in the traditional sense. It has a population of around 120,000 people, but it earns its place on every list of troubled California cities because of what happened in 2008. Vallejo became the largest American city to declare bankruptcy since the Great Depression. The city had a structural budget problem that had been building for years. A large portion of the city budget was going to public employees' salaries and pensions, particularly for police and fire. When the economy crashed in 2008 and tax revenues collapsed, there was simply no money left to run the city. At the peak of the crisis, Vallejo had effectively gutted its public services. Police response times were dangerously long. Firehouses were closing. Libraries shut down. The streets deteriorated. Crime, which was already a problem, got significantly worse. The bankruptcy process took years to work through. The city has made a real recovery since then, and there are neighborhoods in Vallejo today that are genuinely pleasant and show real signs of investment. The waterfront has been developed, new businesses have opened, but Vallejo still carries significant challenges. Violent crime rates remain above average. The psychological legacy of the bankruptcy, the sense that the city was abandoned by its own government, is something that longtime residents still talk about, and the pension obligations that contributed to the original crisis have not gone away. Visitors are often warned specifically about certain neighborhoods, particularly after dark. The recovery has been uneven, and there are parts of Vallejo that feel like the bankruptcy years never really ended. Number 2. Stockton. If Vallejo was the largest American city to go bankrupt before 2012, Stockton then took that record when it filed for bankruptcy that same year. Stockton sits in the Central Valley, and its story is, in many ways, a concentrated version of everything that went wrong in working-class California over the past several decades. The city boomed during the housing bubble of the early 2000s. People who could not afford homes in the Bay Area moved to Stockton and commuted hours each way to work. Property values surged. The city government expanded spending on the assumption that the growth would continue. Then, 2008 happened. Stockton was hit harder by the housing collapse than almost any other American city. Foreclosures were everywhere. Whole neighborhoods became blocks of empty houses. Unemployment shot up. The city lost tax revenue and found itself unable to pay its debts. For several years around the time of and following the bankruptcy, Stockton had the highest per capita homicide rate of any American city its size. Let that sink in for a moment. Not just California, the entire country. The city has worked hard to rebuild. There is a university presence with the University of the Pacific. There are revitalization efforts downtown. Stockton was actually the site of one of the first major universal basic income pilot programs in the country, which attracted significant national attention. But the violent crime problem has been stubborn and persistent. Certain areas of the city remain genuinely dangerous. The poverty that underlies the violence has not been addressed at a structural level, and the reputation that Stockton built during its worst years still follows it, sometimes unfairly coloring perceptions of parts of the city that have genuinely improved. If you are traveling through the Central Valley, people will tell you to stop in Lodi or Modesto before they recommend a stop in Stockton. That reputation was earned, even if the full picture today is more complicated. Number 1. Coalinga. And here we are at number 1, and I want to be upfront about why Coalinga tops this list. It is not the most dangerous city on the list. It is not the most economically devastated. What makes Coalinga notorious in a category of its own is the specific combination of factors that makes it feel unlike anywhere else in California. Coalinga sits in the western San Joaquin Valley, surrounded by oil fields, cattle feedlots, and some of the most punishing heat in the state. On a hot summer day, temperatures regularly exceed 110 degrees. The smell from the nearby feedlots, which are among the largest in the country, carries into town depending on the wind direction. The air quality in the region is consistently among the worst in the nation. In 1983, a major earthquake struck Coalinga, a 6.5 magnitude event that destroyed much of the downtown and killed several people. The rebuilding happened, but the economic energy never really came back. But here is the thing that puts Coalinga in a category of its own on this list. Coalinga is home to the Coalinga State Hospital, one of the facilities in California that houses sexually violent predators who have completed their prison sentences but have been civilly committed as a continued danger to the public. The facility holds some of the most dangerous individuals in the state. Now, the facility itself is secure. The people inside are not walking the streets, but the presence of that facility has shaped the psychology of the town in ways that are hard to articulate. Couple that with the extreme heat, the agricultural and oil industry smells, the air quality issues, the economic stagnation, and the distance from any major city, and Coalinga becomes a place that even people who have lived in struggling California communities describe as uniquely oppressive. Locals who have left will tell you that the town has a heaviness to it that is difficult to explain if you have not experienced it. There are good people there, doing their best. There are families who have been in the area for generations, working in agriculture and oil, but the convergence of factors that define Coalinga, the climate, the air, the economy, the institutional presence, and the isolation, creates an environment that most people encounter once and do not feel compelled to return to. So, there you have it! 7 California towns with stories that the tourist board would rather you did not hear. And look, it is worth saying one more time that every single place on this list has real people in it who call it home. People who love their communities, who are working to make things better, who would push back on some of what has been said here. The goal was never to mock struggling places or the people who live in them. California is a state of enormous contrasts. The same geographies that produces some of the most desirable real estate on Earth also contains some of the most neglected and forgotten communities in America. Understanding that contrast, sitting with it instead of looking away, is part of understanding what California actually is. The sunshine is real, but so are the shadows. If you made it to the end of this, appreciate you spending the time. And next time someone tells you California is nothing but beaches and celebrities, you can tell them it is a little more complicated than that.